PlayStation 2 might just be the best console the horror genre has ever seen. From amazing sequels in franchises like Resident Evil and Silent Hill to truly unique releases like Cold Fear and Obscure, the PS2 saw some of the most pivotal and enduringly popular horror games ever made. It also had Lifeline, which nobody should remember for any reason. I'm Jimmy for Cultured Vultures. I unironically think Run Like Hell is quite good actually, and these are the best PS2 horror games ever made, with one entry per franchise to keep things interesting. Number 10, Obscure. Obscure used the power of the PS2 to take the well-known story of dropping high school kids who look 25 years old into a waking nightmare and turning it into an immersive, creepy PlayStation 2 experience that feels a bit like a precursor to Supermassive's output, as if a character dies, they stay dead. Obscure has you playing as one of 5 students investigating some supernatural happenings in their school, controlling one at a time with the others controlled by either the AI or another player. The co-op in Obscure does work really well, even if you've only got the AI to play with you, but the brilliant 2000s-ness of everything here makes it an absolute ride back in time for you and a friend who remembers Sony Ericsson's, Sum 41, and upsettingly sleeveless shirts. Just wear a vest, guy! Obscure makes it easy to stay connected to one another, even if the camera does always favour a particular player, and its mechanics will often have you boosting each other up to reach vents, watching each other's backs during puzzles, and getting terribly lost. But as a team, you have to admire what the developers were going for here, even if it does have a few charming, kinda archaic flaws. Obscure transports you to its 2000s supernatural teenage horror landscape very effectively, with little touches like being able to combine a flashlight with a weapon, which was pretty innovative for the time, and each character having a special ability, making the game an entertaining release that unfortunately has come to live up to its name as time has passed. It was followed by an even more forgotten sequel, which was known as Obscure 2 in Europe and Japan, and Obscure the Aftermath in America. Number 9, Cold Fear. Alien parasites and shady government dealings. A tale as old as time. Throw in the Russian mob for added fun, and you've got the relatively forgotten but still banging Cold Fear. Receiving mixed reviews while bombing commercially, Cold Fear is another PS2 survival horror that deserves a closer look in modern times. You'll find one of the console's most graphically impressive games in the genre, along with good gameplay and a great, appropriately unsettling and damp narrative. Some of these story beats may sound a bit familiar to you, and generally the Resident Evil 4 influence is kinda hard to ignore, even if they did come out pretty close to each other, but more often than not, Cold Fear finds its own way to feel like a pretty-ish original approach. The game's setting aboard a Russian whaling ship creates some interesting threats, with the ship itself often becoming as adversarial as the zombies encountered by our US Coast Guard protagonist, Tom Hansen, which is named so American he may as well be called Buck Muck Dollar. An unexpected shift in the ship can cause you to lose aim, and in some cases Cold Fear will send you right over the railing and into the ocean. As long as the game's resistance gauge is full, with the gauge decreasing after certain activities like running, you'll be okay. It's a much better usage overall of the ship at sea setting than something like Resident Evil Dead Aim, though I must admit I feel like the only Dead Aim defender in the world. Anyone else? Let me know down below. Cold Fear does an excellent job of offering challenge without turning the game into an exercise in maddening frustration, but it is admittedly a tad janky and rough around the edges. But its flaws don't diminish a tense claustrophobic atmosphere that makes this third-person shooter difficult to put down. Number 8, The Thing. This might be the first time you're hearing this, but licensed games are a very mixed bag. For every Garfield kart, there is a Garfield Kart Furious Racing. So it's easy to be taken aback by just how good the 2002 squad-based third-person shooter The Thing really is. To begin with, the game offers a surprisingly good sequel plot to John Carpenter's perfect 1982 sci-fi alien horror classic. It's a fun story, well, about as fun as your mate morphing into bolognese could be, we guess, that connects nicely to the film, and even includes some cool nods like a cameo by Carpenter himself. Players assume the role of US Army Special Forces Captain J.F. Blake, part of the investigation into the US and Norwegian camps from the first film. The investigation goes great in the sense that everything goes to shit pretty quickly, and the game becomes a blend of solid third-person shooter mechanics and a dread-soaked atmosphere of uncertainty as to who's no longer what they seem. Is it you? Fleshing out the story of the thing is a blast, various puns intended. The gameplay offers frenetic, anxious action, pretty good puzzles, and team management challenges that adds another satisfying layer to what might just be the best video game sequel to a movie ever made. You won't forget where you were the first time after slowly building up their trust, a team member explodes in a mess of weird crab legs and faces. Blending bits of Brothers in Arms and The Suffering, which definitely would have made a top 20. We're looking forward to Night Dive's remaster due later this year, which hopefully will stick around in the public consciousness longer than the 2011 prequel. Number 7, Haunting Ground.
Huey.
It's over.
A spiritual sequel to Clock Tower 3, a game we'll get to soon with numerous thematic and gameplay similarities, Haunting Ground reminds you that Capcom didn't just rest on Resident Evil during the 6th generation for their horror output. Waking up in the dungeon of a castle after a car accident, well, it could be worse, Haunting Ground thrusts young Fiona into strange and frightening circumstances. With your new K9 best friend and a very good boy named Huey, you'll begin exploring your surroundings without any sense of what's even going on. Haunting Ground starts off strong in its storytelling and mystery building, and as you make your way through this pretty challenging survival horror, you'll find that those qualities never really leave. Haunting Ground has rich gothic horror to enjoy in its castle backdrop, and the inclusion of a doggo for your survival isn't nearly as frustrating as you might guess, or as annoying as it was in Blair Witch. Ugh. Just keep in mind that it's integral to the gameplay and for you to survive, with the need to build on a relationship with the dog, which should be easy because again, he's a good dog, Brent. Players also manage features like a panic mode, in which the game takes full control as you completely lose your shit, and also an unknown number calls you in real life. That's the real survival horror trying to get through that. There's a lot to make Haunting Ground special, beyond its immersive charms that very few people seem to click with back in 2005, and that's why we have this madness now. Until Capcom decides to do something with the IP again, what's most haunting is not being able to do a few specific Google searches, if you catch our drift. Number 6, Clock Tower 3.
You can't get away!
In every possible way, Clock Tower 3, which was technically Clock Tower 4, aspired to tell a much bigger and more ambitious story than previous point-and-click installments, and the more demanding gameplay reflected that and just how much the genre was changing too. Players assume the role of a 15-year-old girl named Alyssa, and it's her unique abilities that will help you survive a plethora of monsters, some very spooky destinations, and the game's inclusion of time travel. I mean, it does have a clock in it after all. A bit of a rarity in survival horror really, unless you like your survival horror to be a bit wetter. The time travel aspect of Clock Tower 3 has players dealing with a lot more than just recurring series antagonist Scissorman, the silliest of all the little dudes, who are actually scissor people here, with a scissor brother and scissor sister. Not like that. Not like that. Moving across different eras and times, which the game effectively creates no matter where you are, you'll be facing a range of creatures in the pursuit of the game's larger plot of understanding what the hell is going on with Alyssa in the first place, and why everyone is such a freakazoid. Clock Tower 3 focuses on searching for specific items and solving puzzles to lock new areas across the 1940s and 1960s. You'll rarely have a weapon at your disposal, with the emphasis here on hiding in lockers, like you're the average otaku, and avoiding whatever's after you. As you'll find once you start playing Clock Tower 3, a lot is after you, a lot, creating a relentlessly tense, often weird atmosphere and a great time for PS2 horror fans. Not that fun, kinda sad fact for you, the director of the iconic battle royale movie, Kinji Fukasaku was also the director here in his only video game directorial role, with Clock Tower 3 being the last project he completed before his passing in 2003. Rest in peace. Number 5. Rule of Rose. Set in England in the 1930s, players in Rule of Rose control a young girl named Jennifer, who finds herself in the presence of a deeply frightening class hierarchy known as the Red Crayon Aristocrats. Quite the departure for a developer whose first game was all about snogging. A psychological horror story with deep roots in the inherent terror of childhood itself, Rule of Rose grabs you early with something you really can't find anywhere else on the PlayStation 2. While the plot, music, general ambiance and larger mysteries of Rule of Rose are quite frankly fantastic, the actual gameplay itself also holds up nicely. Well, apart from when you have to hit things though. Jennifer explores her surroundings, solves refreshingly easy puzzles not designed by insane people, and tries to survive increasingly fraught encounters with monsters, the class system, and that pretty infuriating combat. But good news, there's another good boy and you can pet him. This game's at 100 hours long. Rule of Rose is also another unique survival horror game that ties your success to a dog, but the good boy needs to be even gooder here, as the rescue named Brown is essential to finding the items that move you to the next point of the game, with Brown tracking down the scent of particular items. Rule of Rose has an incredible studio musician-backed classical soundtrack, characters to get behind, and some of the most unsettling yet beautiful storybook-esque graphics on the console. It's well worth your time in any era of gaming. Just remember that a physical copy of Rule of Rose is going to cost, well, more than a ruler or a rose due to some frankly crazy misleading articles that saw it banned at the time of release. If you want to watch a video on that whole thing, please do let us know. Quick update, future Jimmy here. Unfortunately no flying cars yet, but a whole bunch of copies of Rule of Rose that were never shipped to the UK were recently found, and the price of the game is dropping quite hard. That rules. Number 4, Siren. With a decidedly original approach to gameplay and under the direction of Silent Hill creator Keiichiro Toyama, sorry I've murdered that I think, Siren, also known as Forbidden Siren here in the land of the Never Rising Sun, should be regarded in the same breath as any other contender for the best PS2 horror games of all time. It will probably always be a bit too weird and kinda slightly clunky to get its flowers. Anchored by a series of interconnected time periods, characters and storylines, Siren tried a bold concept known as sight-jacking to give players the ability to see the world through the eyes of vicious zombie-like creatures known as the Shibito, who, for me, are the most unsettling enemies on PS2. I remember seeing these photorealistic guys for the first time, probably right after completing my 5th playthrough of season mode in Here Comes the Pain, and man, this is the kind of shit you just don't forget. The sight-jacking mechanic is intriguing and almost consistently a blast to play around with, becoming increasingly important in a game that's basically got Highlander zombies. For example, you can't kill the Shibito, you can merely slow them down, and your best bet more often than not is to use your perception, find the items that are crucial to the narrative, and get the f*** out of there. Siren keeps you absorbed in the mystery of why the small town of Hanuda seems to be so utterly cursed. As you learn more, the horror genuinely builds, and there are some moments throughout this stealth survival horror gem that will be tough to shake off. This is one of the best looking games on PS2, with atmosphere and dread thicker than a milkshake filled with blood and bits of sick. Siren was followed up with Forbidden Siren 2, which never got an American release due to poor sales, and a PS3 remake called Siren Blood Curse. Number 3, Fatal Frame 3, The Tormented. Fatal Frame, also known as the much less cool Project Zero here in the land of chip butties and depression, had a pair of absolutely brilliant PS2 horror releases, with Fatal Frame 3, The Tormented, getting an edge over the almost equally brilliant Fatal Frame 2, Crimson Butterfly, for just a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is the fact that it's a much more ambitious, sprawling game, with it acting as a bridge between the past two games that ties everything together. Three characters find themselves drawn to a surreal place known as the Manor of Sleep, a crazy hub for your canon carnage that is as big a character as the three main protagonists. It's one of the most visually distinct settings when it comes to the PlayStation 2, while also being shaped by its visitors' past experiences and trauma. That probably sounds a bit familiar, but it could be argued that Fatal Frame 3 is actually a far scarier game than The Hill of No Speaking. You wouldn't have to argue much to make your point there either. Combat here comes down to using a device known as the Camera Obscura, and Fatal Frame 3, The Tormented, will have you often clutching that camera to not only help spirits move on, but prevent yourself from becoming one. Damage is determined by factors like the distance and your film type, and successful encounters can give you the chance later on to upgrade your device. With a lot of the game focusing on dreams, playing Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented can sometimes feel like the great Nightmare on Elm Street game we never got to enjoy. If you want to play Luigi's Mansion and Pokemon Snap for sickos, Fatal Frame 3 is a great pick, one that has somehow never left the PlayStation 2 over all these years. Number 2, Resident Evil 4.
Got something that might interest you.
The remake of Resident Evil 4 is pretty spectacular in all its backflipping glory, but if you find yourself nostalgic for the original, you'll find that the original Resident Evil 4 deserves its place as one of the best horror games of all time, while still feeling like it might not have even needed that remake. As protagonist Leon S. Kennedy, the S stands for sexy, players find themselves on a rescue mission for the US President's daughter, Ashley. The hunt begins in a rural village in Spain, where the efforts of a mysterious cult have created a landscape overrun with farmers who have drunk a bit too much unpasteurized milk. Even with a much greater focus on combat, the game still feels right at home in the Resident Evil universe, with the same intense feeling that you are completely out of your depth against things you can barely comprehend. But now you got a little knife you can use to bash open crates as well, yay. Though the game focuses more and more intently on killing just about everything you meet, Resident Evil 4 does have its fair share of out and out horror. Protecting Ashley naturally becomes a big part of the game later on as well, and while her intense shrieks of panic may make you think that maybe the President of America should have been elected to lead, not to seed, the pair's dynamic is still charming and a precursor for countless duos in the next generation of gaming. Resident Evil 4 successfully tried new things by focusing more on action, but you also get to enjoy the best elements of a Resident Evil game turned up to 11. Shinji Mikami's masterwork is an impressive compromise of wanting to mix things up, while also keeping in mind why this series has been consistently popular for nearly 30 years. Weird creatures, weird dudes, and weird secrets. However, it's not got unfathomable trauma pizza in it, so the only winner for the best PS2 horror game of all time has to be number 1, Silent Hill 2. Two things we learn early on in the masterpiece Silent Hill 2. James Sunderland just wants to find his wife, and James is absolutely not a narrator we should be trusting. There's a potent, almost sadistic sense of uncertainty and fear that dominates this game from the moment you start playing it, and we're not just talking about how shitty the bathroom looks. It feels like everything you could ever want from a Silent Hill sequel almost right from the start, but as this incredible survival horror classic shows, everything we loved about the first game has been taken to some of the darkest depths the PS2 would ever see. Silent Hill 2 revolves around you battering weird creatures to death, finding essential items to move along in the game, and occasionally solving a puzzle. Oh, and once in a while you'll need to survive an encounter with some minor threat named Pyramid Head. He's actually a really nice guy, shouldn't be too much trouble, just give him a Toblerone. What makes Silent Hill 2 so absolutely unforgettable though is how much dread it builds and manifests within you. Every good survival horror game ever made gives you some anxiety to carry from one room to the next. Silent Hill 2 can sometimes make you feel as though you are actually putting yourself in peril by continuing on through the fog with your trusty wooden plank. Something about James's hellish journey, which explores such themes as grief and redemption like few games ever have, has the ability to feel like it's getting into your very bones. A masterclass in atmosphere and pacing, Silent Hill 2 is still one of the best survival horror games ever made. It was a near impossible act for future games to follow, and even the upcoming remake gives you the sense that it just might not have the same punch that PS2 original did. It's just, Team Sleep captured lightning in a bottle here, you know? You can't do that twice. Lightning doesn't strike twice, you don't put lightning in the bottle twice. Or once. You're not even meant to do it that one time, you know? Silent Hill 2 is a game that will either turn you off the genre for life, or it'll make you a devoted fan of this franchise and anything else horror has to offer in video games. It's also got a not very good boy in it. And that was our video looking at the best PS2 horror games of all time. I know some people might not like that Silent Hill 3 and 4 aren't on here, but as well as, you know, Resident Evil Outbreak, but I think it's important to make things a bit more interesting. You know, they're 20 years old. We've been talking about these games for 20 years. Also, it means I get to put Cold Fear in here, and everyone likes that. Anyway, I've been Jimmy for Cultured Vultures, and thank you for watching.